that a little bit tighter for people to respond to it, give me feedback, see what's useful. So let's just go into it. Here go, like, I'm working off notes too, man. Got some notes, and this is the actual cover of the dissertation. Also, let me give you a shout out, like, my area, man. Anytime I did work when I was in school, that shit's a hard process. I always, like, work in community spaces. Sometimes, a lot of times with students, but a lot of times I, like, had quotes in my head. Like, shit is hard. Sit down, write 5 hours, 6 hours, study mad stuff, and put your brain in and kind of hold ideas over hours, over days, connect them to other ideas. So it was a spiritual process for me, and some of that spiritual process was just like what books I had around me. You know what I'm saying? Like, what books was in my building? Like, what ancestors and elders I was like, yo, word, who am I pulling on? And a lot of these is here too because they like some of the references that I used in the dissertation. And others were articles, and others were quotes and poetry and videos. But this is some of the energy that, and you know, when I talk about certain ideas in the first 4 chapters, if any of these books come up or any of these reference points come up, I'll pull these up. But wanted to just show you, I always keep a quote, keep family, keep some energy. Like, because when I'm going into like writing or thinking, like, you know, you never like are the first person to think about an idea. Like, you ain't the first one to be smart, you know? Like, there's always energy and wisdom and stuff that you just building on top of. So I try to keep the ideas and the wisdom that I honor and respect that I want to build on top of, that I'm lucky to have a chance to build on top of. And this is some of the wisdom that was inspiring me. So once again, the name of the dissertation or the title was called Grassroots Tales, Journeys of Inward Healing and Outward Movement Building. And it was authored by myself, the Youth Organizing Collective of H.O.L.L.A, and my wife, family, you know, and my wife, you know, my son Cory, Anthony, the Sen family. And I don't know if you can see this, man. Shout out to YOC, man, the Youth Organizing Collective. That's us in session during the 18-month process. And a lot of this research is captured in like an 18-month youth organizing, training, development process that works from a non-traditional approach. Shout out to MASH. See, MASH just jumped in. MASH is in the picture too, man. How you doing, MASH, man? Miss you, man. Sending you love and spirit. Let's read the abstract. An abstract is a quick version of the whole thing. And like, you know, you try to say 900 pages in like 2 words. You know, so the abstract says, like, this dissertation is rooted in liberation psychology. And that's like in chapter 4. We talk about epistemology. And epistemology is like a term that means like, how is knowledge created? How is knowledge produced? Like, what is your ideas of how you make new knowledge? What is your ideas of what knowledge counts? You see, I said what books I got around me. I could have had like Floyd. I could have had Puget. I could have had a bunch of white psychological theorists around me because they made a lot of literature and empirical scholarship. You know what I'm saying? So I could have definitely did that, but that's not the knowledge and the creation of the knowledge that I'm pulling from. So epistemology is just saying like, yo, how you create knowledge? Why you think that's knowledge? How you know that's knowledge? Why you gonna do that knowledge and not that knowledge? So this dissertation is rooted in like a liberation epistemology. We're gonna talk about epistemology more. And part of what liberation epistemology is saying is like, I was engaged in this research because I was definitely trying to liberate myself. This was a political project. Like, I was not, you know, one example is like, if something was going on at home with like my family and blah, blah, I was not like shutting all of that down all the way just to do assignment. I was just telling the people like, yo, I'm not doing that assignment. And I do it the next day, 2 weeks later, and I'll build with them about it, but I'm not like gonna stress myself out like, oh, I'm in the hospital, I didn't do my assignment, oh, my life is over. I'm just like, yo, I'm not doing that assignment, I'm about to take care of this. And I'm still gonna do the assignment. I'm gonna put my heart in doing the assignment, but like, I'm just centering my liberation and my family liberation before I sent her like to school and whatever syllabus you made that don't think about my family, that don't think about we might be going to the hospital. Like, we historically poor, we stay in a hospital, we stay broke, we stay with no lights on. Your syllabus might not understand that, and then we just gonna figure that out together. But there's also ideas and political stances in academy that I run against, even in a critical program, that I'm like, I don't know if I'm going that way with. So part of the process of being a PhD student was also to like find a space to liberate myself. Secondly, this dissertation is grounded, and we're going to talk more about this, in two kind of theoretical ideas. This big idea called healing justice. And really talking about, for a short description of it now before we go into it, and I talk about that in chapter 3, but it's really in chapter 2 when I go into youth development as well. But talking about how you heal yourself while healing, while healing others, while healing community. In itself is a lot of details of what that means and what's in that, and outside is a lot of details and what that means. But it's an idea of like, yo, you got to be doing that dual work that have a lot of dimensions within each of those factors. And then social political development is like a concept, particularly in youth development, that we're going to talk about in chapter 2 and in chapter 3, that really talks about a particular kind of youth development that's trying to instill a space about critical consciousness. Like critical thinking that's about issues related to people's historical context, social context, and personal context. Like, not just development to learn stuff, how to do a resume, how to be a productive person in society, but like information and knowledge that is particularly related to developing ideas and analysis about your life and your history and you, but also related to getting a job too, but also related to like, going to school, but with all of those kind of like things built into the context. And secondly, a part of social political development is like social action, or youth organizing, or organizing. Like, how do you put those ideas into like reflections and into actions? Some people call it praxis, Paulo Freire. Speaking of Paulo Freire, pedagogy of the oppressed, Paulo Freire. Shout out to Pablo Freire. We got another one, pedagogy of hope, Paulo Freire. Talks about praxis, the iteration of thinking, reflecting, and doing. Doing, thinking, reflecting, doing, and thinking. Like, not no specific order, but you keep those things in a praxis. I'm going to think, if I respond this way, I could get more love. Let me try it. Oh, that didn't work. Let me think about what didn't work. Let me try that again. Let me respond this way. Did I get more love? So you're always thinking about praxis at a relationship level, at a system level, at a historical level, at an institutional level, that relates to your real life. So the last part of social political development is like spiritual enhancement, spiritual development. You know what I'm saying? Really thinking about, and we're going to get more into it because we talking about youth development in the urban context from a non-traditional approach, but part of that means an understanding of historical trauma and generational trauma. We're going to talk about that in chapter 1. But with that understanding, spiritual development, and it also gets into the emotional development, because that's part of the spiritual development, or healing or enhancement is really important in the development. So healing justice, social political development, those were my guides. Those were like the theoretical frameworks, like having those larger understandings and throwing that onto youth development, onto a particularly community-specific youth development. So we got those guides on. H.O.L.L.A comes from, and we're going to talk about that in chapter 2, from a grassroots tradition, particularly inside of prison, particularly grassroots movement. So a really community, non-traditional approach of youth development, and using those theoretical frameworks to really think about how do young people build spirit and sustain collective hope for individual development and building grassroots movements. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of what the dissertation was talking about. Like what are the possibilities of bringing 9 young people together who got similar realities, to dream together and then turn those dreams into movement. So that's some of the abstract I started the dissertation because dissertations usually start off with acknowledgements, talking about like, yo, who you giving honor to. And at H.O.L.L.A, you know, in our family, we usually always talk about our elders and our ancestors. And I started dissertation off with a poem. One of the poems that I've been doing lately, we've been doing lately in our Healing Justice 2.0 circle and community development work, to really bring vibrations, to open up sessions, to open up healing circles, to show people how we come in a good way, and to show people what energy we coming with. So I'm actually going to give y'all that poem, because I just want some of that to be here. But it's kind of like I start the dissertation off with the acknowledgements, saying that, like, you know, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge and thank my ancestors who are always with me and with us. You know, I must acknowledge that my ancestors are a guiding force. And I go down and name a bunch of ancestors, and it leads into saying that the dissertation is dedicated to my ancestors. And I started off by saying, this is for my ancestors, particularly the ones that stand with us and plan with us. I'm talking about a pedagogy of patience. They still waiting for your transformation and for us to heal from all the steel blazing and generation after generation of living out the plantation. This is for our ancestors, particularly the ones that get killed for you, sacrifice and build for you. I'm talking about indigeneity without no regulation. Culture is our education. Emotional communication. Vulnerability is what we embrace, and this is for our ancestors. Particularly the ones that love you when they don't got to, but love you because they got you. This is for our ancestors. Particularly the ones that stand with us and plan with us. We talking about a pedagogy of patience. They still waiting for our transformation and for us to heal from all the steel blazing and generation after generation of living out the plantation. That was for our ancestors. So I started off with that poem and giving shout outs to our ancestors. And then I go into a deep shout out to my wife, Teresa, and talk about how she's important in my development and what I learned from her, how that's connected to like a lot what the dissertation is about, particularly about journeying. And then I segue into my son, Cory, and talk about how important he is and how a lot of connecting to my legacy and thinking about what legacy I want to leave or be a part of started when I started connecting to him, which is a lot about what this dissertation is about legacy. And then I go into my mom's, give her acknowledgement, shout out to Mother Green, and talk about how my mother is like, come from like all, not all, but many traditions of like black people, at least in the Western world, like the South, you know, the migration, you know, Jim Crow, crack epidemic, war on drugs. And she just keep going on anyway. Like, she just one of those black people that struggle and just keep going on anyway. And also lets me know that, like, you know, we carry the lineage of our peoples through those journeys, and his wisdoms and all of those stops and who we are and who we are today and how we got here today. So I honor that. And then going into my mom's, who's from Mississippi, I just honor like the Mississippi roots. And the acknowledgements, like my aunts, my cousins, the lessons and the fabric that we get from Mississippi. And then my mom's moved to New York, and particularly Queens, the Bomb Building. And the Bomb Building is what raised me. And a lot of who y'all see and like what I think about, like swag and theorizing street epistemology, come from like so many people teaching me at the Bomb Building and just being fortunate enough to grow up at 96th Street in Queens. And then another part of my family, my mom's history, is Chicago, because a lot of us moved to Chicago and really grounding like our cousins and our aunts in a house that we bought in Chicago, and that journey from carrying our lineage from Mississippi to Chicago. So I grounded all of that. And then I really talked about the legacy, particularly H.O.L.L.A and YOC and Alex and Mashley and Shaq and Phil and Lauren and Gina and KJ and Doc, Chino, Rakim, A-Rox, Rachna, who really like was the featured stars in the actual writing of the dissertation, but also taught me so much throughout the process, and also journeyed with me throughout the process. And this is also their like wisdom. You know, a lot of it came through me going through the school and sharing it, and even me doing this now. But it's like all of our knowledge. So definitely wanted to give a shout out to H.O.L.L.A, and that also goes to like the Bedford Hill sisters, the Greenhaven think tank, the Resurrection Study Group, and really like that echo of currently and formerly incarcerated people doing really important work on themselves that translate to work in their families, work in their community, that spreads across to all of us, and we hope to be more of that, and we just definitely got inspired by that. And that's what this dissertation is representing, a lot of formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated like empirical scholarship. And then shout out to all of my bonds in the academy. I really was talking about all of my friends, my sisters, my brothers, professors that studied with me, that gave me study advice, that we spent hours going through research ideas together, and all the lessons that came from like presenting together, practicing on presenting together, doing research together. And then that trickled down into my dissertation committee. So shout out to the acknowledgements. And I felt like it was important to end the acknowledgements by saying that I want to give a shout out to the people. Because there's like people that I don't know about, and people who struggle so that any black people can just have access into the academy. And there's people that like I know of that did that, but there's also people I don't know of. And there's other things that I probably wasn't thinking about that people struggle, so that it was an opportunity for me to get into the roles and into the pockets that I was able to get into, that I didn't really have to do that much work to get into those pockets. But besides being the version of myself, but it was other people who did a lot of work. So I gave acknowledgement to the people and to that energy that I don't see. And then I gave acknowledgement to myself, who had doubts, and who doubts going to come back again, and who had doubts throughout the process, who had doubts before I ever even knew what a PhD process is. And to remind myself that even with those doubts, you can accomplish. Not saying that a PhD is the most, but it's something that that my organization, that I'm a part of H.O.L.L.A, that my family, that my block, that a lot of formerly incarcerated people, that we grateful that like we can go through this process that is really trying to dismantle us and dismantle our spirit and accomplish that. It's less about like something personal and something more so that like that's like a form of resistance, that like, you know, we strong like that. So I wanted to hold that reflection there. So this is perfect. We in the last hour, so the last hour is going to be kind of snappy, and we're going to get more into like the details of the dissertation.